Please welcome the Consumer Technology Association's Senior Vice President for CES and Corporate Business Strategy, Karen Chupka.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully the thunder and the lightning has left us and the rain is gone. So, welcome to day 2 of CES. It's going to be a really great day. There is sunshine. What more can we ask for? Well, CES is where the mobile ecosystem comes together. The technologies on the show floor are changing lives and the world, and all for the better. And many of these innovations are powered by connectivity. This morning, we're going to take a deep dive into 5G, the next generation of connectivity. Delivering more bandwidth, lower latency, and faster speeds than today's networks. 5G will accelerate innovation across all the technologies on all the displays here at CES, from smart homes to appliances to drones and robotics, self-driving cars, and even smart cities. And this morning's panel is going to explore the innovations that are going to be unleashed by the 5G technology. So here to lead us through the discussion is Sue Merrick. Sue is VP of Content and Editor-in-Chief at SDX Central. She covers 5G and IoT for the publication, and she oversees all of the editorial content on the site. And previously, she was Editor-in-Chief of Fierce Markets Telecom Group. Sue has been covering the telecom industry for many, many years, so we're very excited to have her on this stage. So please join me in welcoming Sue Merrick.
Just a young gun with a quick fuse. I was uptight, wanna let loose. I was dreaming of bigger things.
Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us. I've been covering the wireless industry for almost 2 decades, or a little more than 2 decades. I kind of hate to admit that, but I've covered a lot of the Gs, 2G, 3G, 4G, and now I'm covering 5G. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I've been getting a lot of questions. What is 5G? How is it going to be different than 4G? And we're going to discuss those today. So I'd like to bring out my panelists. I've got a great panel here. Come on out, gentlemen. This is Cristiano Amon with Qualcomm, Chi Lu with Baidu, Hans Vestberg with Verizon. Thank you, gentlemen. So let's get started. Chi, I wanted to start with you because I think the audience probably may not all know what Baidu is and what you do. So could we start with that? Why don't you explain a little bit about Baidu?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Let me give you a quick overview about Baidu. The simplest way to understand what Baidu is, just think about Baidu is the Google of China. It's the largest search engine for the China market, has a strong lineup of consumer services. However, Baidu is pivoting the entire company to AI. We call ourselves an AI company designed for speed of innovation, particularly for productization and the commercialization of AI technology. I want to emphasize it's all about commercializing the technology. Otherwise, it's just all talk. So specifically, here's what we do. We're going to use AI to transform what we call the current set of businesses. Search, in our view, will be still important, but it will become increasingly more personalized recommendations. In a mobile, we call it new mobile. I'll come back just a little bit, talk about what new mobile means. The other is transform our video and entertainment business. Baidu owns a subsidiary called iQIYI. You can think about it's the Netflix of China, but bigger. And a bunch of other businesses. New mobile is important because we believe the future phones will have increasing sensing capabilities, optical sensing, environment sensing, dedicated neural computing silicon SoCs. That will enable new form of interactions, different type of richer content, all sorts of experiences, personalized recommendation, video, gaming, all those Baidu is innovating in a big way. So that's transforming our current business by AI. The even more important thing is building a serious new AI-enabled businesses, particularly self-driving cars and conversational AI. For me personally, I do a lot of technologies when I was at Microsoft, Yahoo. In my mind, there's no question the frontier of driving AI, it's all related to connectivity, by the way. Driving AIs are these two platforms. One is conversational AI. It's going to enable a new way of interaction, because today we mostly sort of finger and touch, mouse and keyboard, voice, natural language. This modality will be everywhere. The initial go-to-market on-ramp will be smart homes, in-vehicle navigations in that. And we're doing a tremendous amount of work. Our platform is the largest leading platform. We call it DualOS. You can think about it's Alexa for China, but much more powerful for the Chinese market. The other one is self-driving car. That's just to give me 1 minute. I'll explain that why this is so exciting.
Okay, get 1 minute, and then we're gonna.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna come back.
1 minute, because the self-driving car we have what's called Apollo. You can think about it's a powerful open platform, the Android for car, but way more powerful. At the CES just 2 days ago, we showed the first ever a live parade of a fleet of 10 vehicles built on the same platforms. They're all self-driving, L3 and L4. It's tremendous. So in a nutshell, Baidu is a company innovating at a very rapid pace using AI, and we are leveraging what we call the China speed. China's market is growing, in my view, honestly, at a much faster pace. But we want the Baidu innovation to benefit everybody. That's why CES is very important. We want to showcase our capability. We want to take our technology and the business global. So DualOS will be global already in Japan. Apollo will be global in Singapore, South Asia, and a lot more to come.
Okay.
But thank you for the opportunity.
We're gonna come back.
I know I'm a little bit using your more time.
I do have two other speakers. Hans, you recently joined Verizon after years of working for an equipment company. So what have you kind of learned along the way, and how? Tell us about how that relates to 5G, because you've been talking about 5G for a long time.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I did 28 years for a Swedish great company. Worked, of course, with all technologies, all the Gs that you talked about on the forefront on 2G, 3G, 4G, and also, of course, starting the 5G race. And it's just an exciting time to join Verizon in the forefront of implementing it. I have been giving advice to all the carriers in the world what they should do with technology, and now I'm sitting there myself and I'm receiving it. So. No, it's just a fantastic journey to be part of that, and of course coming into Verizon with an enormously strong engineering capability, good execution. We have assets all the way from Yahoo to telematics to the traditional networks. So of course it's a great opportunity when 5G is coming into the market right now, and we have already announced that later this year we're going to have the first slice of 5G, which is residential broadband in 3 to 5 markets commercially. So we are really ahead of this. Before I joined, they had worked a lot with 5G already. So we are super excited, I have to say.
And I'm going to come back to you about the 5G rollout. But Cristiano, so Qualcomm is a chipset company, but you're also very involved in 5G R&D. Tell the audience a little bit about how you guys think of 5G and what they should know about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Very happy we have a full house. I think 5G is important. I will say one thing that Chief from Baidu said that it's right at the heart of many of the things that we believe 5G will bring is actually a transformation in mobile. When we are in this interesting time of the industry in the mobile, which is in between Gs, that's how we call it right now, and I think there are questions about what is going to happen with the mobile industry as they mature. I think that 5G is coming, and it's going to significantly transform the mobile industry. The mobile industry is not static. The photograph we have right now, it is not how it's going to be, and it's going to change dramatically. And that's because of how we think about the role of 5G. The problem that 5G comes to solve, it's number one, I think users want now more data. They want unlimited data. I think it's Verizon as well. They want higher speeds. And they now assume that connectivity needs to be there. That's why we have the metaphor about electricity. It's like we just don't talk about the use cases anymore. We just assume it's there. And then you have changed the paradigm by having everything connected with the cloud. The other thing that 5G does has to do with other industries. 5G is taking the scale of mobile to the other industries. So we're going to have massive IoT. And the last element, we started to add something we never had in any of the Gs, which is the ability to support mission-critical services. So what 5G will basically do is make sure that every single connectivity is going to be wireless, it's going to be a fully convergence connectivity, and it's going to go not only about mobile, what's we use case we talk about right now, but it's going to be basically everywhere. And I just go back to that point, how it's going to empower the scale that we have on smartphone to many new use cases. That's a very exciting thing within the mobile environment itself.
Okay, so 5G, I know like probably a lot of consumers think, oh, that means I'm going to have to get a new phone.
I hope so.
But in reality, it's bigger than that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hans, you've talked about a little bit about the societal impact, I guess, would be maybe one way of phrasing it.
Two things I think is important, and being part of designing 2G, 3G, and 4G, they were predominantly consumer technologies with speed and throughput being better every time. When we started with 5G, of course, we thought a lot about industries, as Cristiano said. I mean, secure, many more connection, etc. That was the start of the 5G, and suddenly you have new currencies. And I mean with the currency, low latency is a new currency, security is a new, and multi-connectivity is a new one. Speed and throughput will be there as well. So that's how 5G started, so one need to remember that. Ultimately, consumers will get the benefit of all that as well. But it's also a lot of use cases for industry and society. And when I think about what this industry, the mobility, broadband, and cloud has done, we have started with the transformation of us in this room with a smartphone. That's where we are. Where we're now starting to do is also transform industries and ultimately the society, and that's what Cristiano talked about. So the 21st century's infrastructure to make it sustainable will be 4G enabled 5G, where you can actually do everything for connected cars, smart cities and all of that. That's the next step. Obviously, consumers, we in this room, we will get higher speeds, more throughput and all of that. But it's also geared for industries being transformed and society getting possibility to transform industry and be more efficient.
And Chi, this is how AI fits, right, in with 5G. Do you want to address some of the capabilities you guys are thinking about?
Absolutely. I would just add on to what Hans and Cristiano was saying. Essentially, from our perspective, what's truly transforming is the AI technology together with 5G connectivity, what they can do. Specifically, I'll emphasize a couple of dimensions. One is, Cristiano said it, mission-critical nature, particularly for the Apollo platforms. We've been working with a lot of partners, particularly actually one of the partners is NXP, the companies that Qualcomm is buying. We have a lot of, they are one of the early adopters of the Apollo open source platform. We have a fantastic relationship. But having said that, having mission-critical low latency, because it's critical when you put those type of connectivity computing sensors in a car, the car moves by itself, is extremely important because of safety, security, but also a car that moves by itself, by definition, is also a weapon because you also want to make sure that the chipset has security, strong security built in. So security and safety, reliability, mission critical, I think it's transformative. The other thing I would just maybe say a bit long term, because Cristiano talked about the mobile vitality of the mobile industry. In my personal view, AI is going to extend that in a big way. The reason is the following. Mobility is the fundamental essence of intelligence. The reason is why animal has a brain, tree, plant doesn't have a brain. Simple. Animal has to move. If you need to move, you must memorize and generalize. AI is really all about, at its core, the computing is about memorization and generalizations. But the mobility is the key. Now, I think this is why personally for me, because I'm diving into the self-driving car technology myself, because I see this is the new frontier, because mission critical natures, but it will carry the frontier of intelligent systems that we built. Okay. And the other aspects is certainly the privacy. I think privacy, in my view, is extremely important, because now you have voice-enabled devices in home, in a living room, in car, everywhere. You want to do things in a way so that privacy is fully ensured. Particularly in that context, I think edge computing in the new mobile. doing a lot more on the endpoints versus ship to the cloud
Right.
is a key part of the transforming dimensions from our perspective.
Interesting. So when are we going to, so we talked a lot about the vision and the possible capabilities down the road, but I think the next question is when? When are we going to see this? Hans, I know that Verizon's made an announcement, 3 to 5 markets.
3 to 5 market this year.
This year.
So that's, and remember now, from the 5G you can do different slices. We are now focusing on one slice, which is basically residential broadband with millimeter wave spectrum, in order to get superior performance quicker to the market. So that's what we're launching already this year, which is ahead, of course, of the standard. But we have worked quite long with it. We have had test beds, 11 cities during 1.5 years, I guess. So we are surprised how the millimeter wave, how great it is, and the speed and throughput before is up over 1 gig on 1,000, 2,000 feet. So it's a big difference how you can do things right now. So, but that's only one use case. Where we can talk about many others, but we start with that use case.
So you're starting with residential broadband in these 3 to 5 markets using millimeter wave, but it is the pre-standard version of
Yes.
5G.
And as soon as we have a standard, of course, we move to that. But what we have learned is, of course, we got extremely good competence how millimeter wave works, because that's very important, but also how 5G is working, because it is another design and standard. Remember now that historically standardization has been on the radio. Now it has to include also the core parts of the network, so it's a much bigger thing. You have to think, basically you need to go from the radio interface and somebody receiving something up to the data center and back. So it's a much bigger work you need to do in the network and actually get these type of
So the standardization is more complicated, would be
5G is more complicated because it's getting much more power out of it. But every technology is more complicated than the previous one.
Now I have to ask you about your competitor, one of your big competitors, AT&T. They've said they're going to launch 5G mobile using the standard, 12 markets by the end of the year. Is there a race? Is there a 5G race? Is this what we're going to see happening now?
So, you know, I cannot comment on what they are saying. I think it has to stand for them. I think you need to have Donovan or somebody answering that. I can answer for Verizon. We will be first. That is the most important.
Verizon will be first?
Yeah.
Okay. You heard it here. Okay, let's talk about the rest of the world. I know we were focused a bit on the U.S. Chi, can you tell us a little bit about China and what they're planning to do with 5G? And, you know, are they going to be as quick as the U.S., faster even? I don't know.
Yeah, so Baidu as a company, we're not principal in the communication business, but we do participate, for China, the top 3 mobile operators. By the way, Baidu is one of the investors for China Unicom. China Unicom is doing the structural reform. Essentially, in some ways, there's a mixed ownership. So Baidu is participating in that reform. So from what we can see, the timeline is consistent on the global scale. Essentially, largely we expect around the year 2020. This year will be a lot of trial, experimentation, deployment. Baidu is participating in a number of areas. For example, one is in IoT. Specific case will be like, say, bike sharing. Bike sharing, by the way, is huge now. It's everywhere in all the major metropolitan. Bike sharing, battery charging, those type of services, and then in V2X is a key part of what Baidu is doing. Essentially, we see our role is really drive frontier of innovation for application for end users. That's why I emphasized earlier. So essentially, from our standpoint, it's all about commercializing the capability, finding large commercial on-ramp, and accept the deployment. Once the deployment happens, there are a lot more acceleration can come for those infrastructures to be deployed.
You should probably explain what CV2X is, because I'm not sure everyone knows. So.
Well, V2X essentially is a vehicle to a bunch of other communication, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to human, vehicle to infrastructures, what's broadly called V2X communications. As part of the Apollo platforms, we're working with a number of partners to design and implement new way of V2X application and scenarios. In that particular context, one thing I want to add is you need to have policy innovations together with the technology, the infrastructure deployment. Because in V2X, for example, Baidu is working with a number of municipal government in China to design new infrastructures, new city infrastructure, new policies that make it easier so that not only the commercial deployment of the new technology, but overall the future urban areas will be highly efficient. One thing I want to call out, just 30 seconds for everybody to pay attention to, this thing called Xiong'an. Xiong'an is the next mega city in China. It's being built ground up. Essentially, President Xi kind of initiated this new massive initiative. It's designed to be bigger than Shenzhen, bigger than Dubai, a lot of other cities. But the intent is to lead the future of urban designs. And new infrastructures, communication infrastructures, autonomous mobilities is being designed from the ground up. Our view is, at this stage, policy innovation, technology innovation, tangible, commercializable opportunities to drive innovation in combination, in unison, is a key to enable new generation of infrastructure to be deployed. Once the infrastructure is in the door, the innovation will blossom. But initially, you need a few big on-ramps to lead the way. Self-driving, in our views, is absolute one. Conversational AI for smart home is the other one.
And so he had a lot to say there. I know you guys are also involved in the cellular vehicle,
Cellular Vehicle X.
There you go, the acronym. But also from your point of view, because you work with carriers all over the world, what do you think about timing?
Look, we're working very hard. I think maybe just to recap, one of the, I think, great accomplishment we had as an industry in 2017, which started early. I go back to what happened right at the MWC when a group of 40 companies got together to try to accelerate 5G. And I think what Hans just mentioned, I think our major Christmas gift right around Christmas time, we got the 3GPP approved, the first release, and it's finalized. So standard is no longer an uncertainty. And with that, we're basically working so that by the early in 2019, you'll be able to have flagship smartphones in the shelf available for consumers, and we want to start the transition to 5G. There's one thing when people talk about the transition of a technology, right? And one of the unique things about 5G, I'm sure will make Hans very happy, will make Xi very happy, is as you get connectivity with the cloud every time. One of the data that we have seen in phones, you see phones going up in price. I think it broke new ceilings with certain models, but there you see increase of onboard memory, flash going from 64 gig to 128 to 156, and is increasing the bill of materials and the price of the phone. Well, when 5G happens, you reverse that trend. You don't need that much memory in the phone. So you actually could have a situation that the technology cost of building a multi-mode, a 4G, 5G into a phone could be offset by a reduction in the memory requirement because you're relying on cloud storage much more. So we actually think we can start having phones early in 19, and we actually could have, surprisingly, a very positive transition, of migration from 4G devices to 5G.
When you say positive, you mean not
The
necessarily
speed of
big,
transition.
Oh, so big speed of
Yes,
the transition.
speed of transition.
2019 for smartphones.
In other devices, but I just want to refer to smartphone because you said you want to buy a new phone.
I know, well, yeah, everyone is asking that question.
Yeah. Now, one comment maybe on the prior conversation. You asked about China. So I believe, like many markets, United States, China, Europe, Japan, Korea, you have a lot of activities for early 5G deployment in 2019. And I think, we're actually very excited that in that case, you see United States and China, moving at a very fast speed. And when you think about the mobile industry and the mobile ecosystem, I think the scale is going to be, enormous. And as you get the mobile industry moving with smartphones, the scale is so big that it actually brings the economies of scale faster to all the other industries. So that's one of the interesting things about this 5G transition. We actually could see an adoption, not only in phones, but in PCs with like the iOS connected PC. I cannot think of in the 5G era a not cloud connected PC. So, and many other IoT devices. So that's why this transition from 4G to 5G happening fast is also important, because the scale we can get to other industries is also going to happen in an early timeline.
So it will be faster than, will it be faster than previous, than it sounds like, than
If you have
4G?
looked at all the technologies, I mean, the swap from between 2G to 3G was a certain amount, 3G to 4G was quicker, 4G to 5G will be quicker. Then the coexistence between 4G and 5G will continue. I mean, think about 5.5 billion mobile subscribers in the world today, 3.5 billion roughly are 4G. Of course, 4G will be there worldwide for a long time. And if we see in the early predictions going forward, I mean, there are 2-3 markets that will be very early on 5G and have a high adoption. And of course, Cristiano mentioned them, like Korea, US, China to some extent, but it's a large market. So, but 4G will be there and it will be coexisting, and it has to be coexisting, but that's the good with this whole standardization. And of course, I come from that part of the industry which just think is fantastic that whatever technology and phones you come up with will work in the 193 or 200 countries in the world, and you get scale, so basically every person on this earth can afford it. I mean, it's just an amazing industry from that, and sometimes we tend to forget that's why all these companies comes together and make a standard that was done the 20th of December or something like that, the Christmas gift that Cristiano talks about. I just think that is amazing, and we're just going to be on that bandwagon with the rest of them, and seeing that anybody from people to business, society, will benefit of this technology.
There's a track record, I think, on the speed of migration that you can see. If you go back to the 3G era, if we remember, we started with 3G, and then we get to, like if I talk, whether CDMA 2000.
Well, yeah, we also had a couple different standards.
Yeah, CDMA 2000 or WCDMA, we get like this big migration to megabits.
I remember that.
Yeah, with HDS-DPA. Then you have, another migration to a fast uplink. If you look what happened in 4G, just within 4G, we have seen super fast migration. We started at 100 megabits, we went to 100, 150, 300, 500, 600, now we have gigabit LTE. So you can use that as a proxy of how you should think about speed of transition, just within 4G in itself. The other element of this is what Hans mentioned. The encouraging point, and it is a sign of what's to come, is you see how big the momentum has been of operators upgrading their 4G network to gigabit LTE. We have over 43 operators now that are building gigabit LTE, because what gigabit LTE role in a 5G network will be what 2G and 3G used to be when you build 4G, because you're going to have that strong foundation and you'll start building services on 5G. So I think everything is going in the right direction, and just the momentum on gigabit LTE is probably an indicator of how successful the migration will be.
Can I just
go ahead.
add to this, because I want to make a case that it will accelerate and the gift will keep coming because of AI. Because AI, the innovation will accelerate. The fundamental nature of AI, it requires lots of data to work. In many ways, data is a new form of capital. It's a means of production. Because in the AI era, just a simple example, you cannot build a system with brilliant people, millions of engineers that understand the natural language conversation. You have to have data. You cannot build a system that can recognize all the objects on the road and be able to navigate. You have to have data. So the key thing is, with more data, the innovation cycle will accelerate. And in particular, because Cristiano said China, United States, in our views, China, United States will have scale impact. China in particular have more data. 1.38 billion people, over 1.1 billion smartphone users, online population 750 million people. For anything matters to people, just way more data. And for cars, similar. A couple 100 million cars. Why the speed is accelerating? Just out of my own experience, Sue, I started my job a little bit less than a year ago. I joined Baidu. And our open platform for autonomous driving is about 8 months old. Guess what? Okay. We have this year L4 commercial productions of minibus. Next year, 2020, 3 sedans with L3 productions. The speed is accelerating because AI technology, in my views, China, United States, China because there's more population, there's just more traditional industry base to tap more data into it. So I think the gift will keep coming, but our job is really to unleash that capability.
Thank you.
To give tangible value to our customers, to our users.
That's amazing. 8 months, and now you already have a commercial product, and next year you're going to have 3 sedans. Is that 8 months? 8 months of development.
Just to make sure I understand the question that Sue asking, the platform was launched July last year. Just like Android for cars, but a lot more open.
Okay.
We are having commercial production of L4, which is essentially the car drive by itself.
Okay.
It's unheard of speed. I couldn't envision this when I started. This is like exceeded our wildest imaginations, but shows the power of the technological innovation capability. And the key thing, maybe I will say one more thing, is Baidu take an open platform approach. We have an open platform for cars, open platform
standard.
for conversational AIs. It come from maybe my personal background. When I was at Yahoo, now you have Yahoo now. So when I was at Yahoo, my team actually.
It's okay.
Yes, we're partners. Small industry. Small. My teams, out of a little bit of a historical accident, created something called a Hadoop. Because I see the power of a Hadoop ecosystem. Enables so many businesses to have analytics intelligence. So we are strong believer at Baidu. Our open platform, open innovation, tapping into the vast opportunity, what we call the China speed. Because in China, there's also government willingness to invest, policy enabling cars to be tested easier. But we want our innovation to benefit the whole world. I think United States, China together with other markets, I think the gift will keep coming.
Now, we've talked a lot about speed, gigabit, LTE, but latency. Latency is the other key here. And when we talk about AI and autonomous driving, let's explain a little bit about latency and how that affects this. Cristiano, you want to go?
Yeah. In the feature set of 5G, we want to bring, the latency over the air to 1 millisecond. So to give you comparisons, about 30x improvement over 4G.
Over 4G.
And what actually that bring is a number of different, I think, use cases of transformation. Like, for example, there's one, which is we've seen the reaction of many of the ecosystem and cloud companies, in particular the ones that have been building mobile-based social networks. When you think about people interaction, when you have 1 millisecond latency for the existing social network services we have today, you started to introduce the element of social presence. So that will actually change and upgrade dramatically how you think about social interactions and real-time interaction with people. That's just one of it. The other one that latency will do is you start to rely much more on cloud storage and cloud connectivity because you actually have a response time. It's going to be like having no difference whether the data is going to be in the cloud or it's going to be with you. And that's going to start changing business model left and right. Like one great example of this, which is very good for the cloud companies, is very good for the operators, is IT infrastructure is going to start to move up to the cloud. And you're going to be in the intranet 100%. That adds to the security, no SSID and passwords, no public, private. Everything starts to move up. And then the other thing that you do, you start collecting more data, you apply more machine learning and more AI. So actually the latency, it's fundamental. And then the last piece is that we just talk about it, is just allow mission critical, operators, which will have an impact in healthcare, in telemedicine, in many other industrial applications, automation and control. So latency actually is one of the pillars of 5G technology, is the latency upgrade.
Agree.
Yeah. So I was just emphasizing the mission critical nature for vehicles because
Yes.
you have, within a short term, for human about 300 milliseconds, you have to make a move. The computational resources, the amount of data, all the sensors, LiDAR, cameras, radars, all these things have to be fused together in that short span. Connectivity latency is extremely important because today's vehicle, we talked about all the L3, L4,
Right.
they all require something called HD maps. These are maps not for the human to see, for the sensor to see. But the HD maps have to come from the cloud. You have to have low latency in mission critical manners. So for me personally, it reminds me, my business right now is not communication, but when I was at Carnegie Mellon, did my PhD thesis, I was doing mobile. And we always optimize for 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds, because my experience is that once you reduce latency, just open up opportunities for all sorts of applications. So 5G in that regard, for me personally, as more of a technologist, is fantastic because with low latency, you can open up so much opportunities.
No, I can just add, just so you understand, I think that what both of you are saying is that when the latency come down to those levels, you can just take away a lot of, let's say, assets that are very close to where you do the execution. I mean, you can think about the camera today having a lot of intelligence out in the camera doing video. That could only be a lens in the future because you can do all the live from the mobile edge. It could be anything like, I mean, think about virtual reality, for example. I mean, 70 milliseconds is good for that. I mean, now we're down to 1. Then you have mobile virtual reality. But of course, to get to 1, you need to design the network very clearly, because it's not only the radio access anymore, because you actually need to go up to the data center. And suddenly you have a totally different infrastructure that you need to set up. And that's why we at Verizon, for example, now came out with a new architecture, which is called the Intelligent Edge Network, where we're basically reusing a lot. And then you need fiber, because ultimately you need to transport this with fiber.
Right.
It will not work without that. You need a passive infrastructure, and then you need spectrum that can handle it then in a little bit bigger chunks in order to do it. So it also requires a different set of assets to be able to do it. But to be honest, that currency we have never thought about being mobile before. And again, I think our imagination is probably our limitation. When you have open platforms and a lot of great developers all around the world, and we have so many people that are now connected, that's why I say that whatever technology revolution you have seen before is super slow compared to what you're going to see in the future, because so many are going to be part of this.
So I was told not to get too technical, but you guys are talking edge computing, you're talking cloud, you're talking...
Was that technical? I thought that was pretty
that's becoming the norm of discussion, right? Well, as long as we're being a little nerdy, let's talk about millimeter wave, Hans, because so that spectrum is, you know, it could have some difficulties, short range, or you tell me, what have you learned with millimeter wave? Because it's never been used for these kinds of applications.
I think that what we have learned is, of course, that of course, millimeter wave extremely high up in the stack of frequencies means that the range is not that long. But the throughput is enormous because you can get big chunks of megahertz. That means that you can get up to 1 gig, 5 gig in throughputs on 1,000, 2,000 feet. And what we learned was that you can go to 2,000 feet, you're easily on 1
So things like trees,
yeah,
rain,
we had, of course, worries about non-line of sight, half line of sight with things. That has proven to work very well. I think that the challenge that we're seeing in some cases is that we need a different installation indoor in order to receive the signal, because you build houses much smarter today, that for any signal, to be honest, that indoor coverage is tougher. But I think that the millimeter wave in our test, which started long before I was there, has proven to be surprisingly better than we thought.
Surprisingly better?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we see also right now, and as you have seen, there were basically all markets in the world that are into 5G right now are doing millimeter wave. We launched with Cristiano's team right now, and are on millimeter wave with Novotel coming out with products and doing very good tests with that. So now but again, it's the spectrum holding in total you need to think about, but millimeter wave will be important for big throughputs, low latencies.
Do we want to talk a little bit about spectrum? Because yes, spectrum's fundamental. You need fiber too. And spectrum, as we know, is a constrained resource. So, Cristiano?
So I will start by just validating what Hans said. I think from a Qualcomm standpoint, and we have done a number of different field trials. I think we have, we have our first chipset, the X20, that is going to be supporting, both millimeter wave and sub-6 to enable, all the devices we've been in the development. And I think the results we're seeing with millimeter wave, it's very, very positive. I would say that I think the ability to put a millimeter wave in a 5G standard, some of the elements of fast switching on 5G. And what we basically see is, even if you deploy an existing market, yes, the networks are going to get more dense, but if you look in some of the existing markets and you just put millimeter wave there, just because of how the system works, we're seeing, coverage reliability like in the 60-70%, which you can see about how much traffic you can take in relying on some of the lower frequencies that propagate further to build, and you have the gigabit LTE foundation. So I believe at the end, the industry already made the decision. The last mile data to the end device is wireless.
Really?
And therefore, I think we always joke like resistance is futile. Allocate everything to wireless, right? So I think you're going to see millimeter wave spectrum. We see bands in the upper part of 26, 28, 39, and we also see sub-6, in the 3.5 band and some refarming of existing spectrum. I think we're trying to design a system so it's going to be flexible to accommodate all those bands and be able to operate in multiple markets to have scale. And the interesting thing about the whole spectrum discussion, which is 5G is not about a millimeter wave choice or a sub-6 choice. It's actually about all of it. It's about a gigabit LT foundation. It's a sub-6 frequency. It is probably rely on the existing, network architecture, and then you overlay that with a more dense, or not necessarily, depending on the outdoor use cases, doesn't need to that significantly more dense millimeter wave. And you talk about gigabit, units of gigabit, tens of gigabit, and it is about all the system working as one. And I think we're designing our chips for that, and I think that's how 5G successful rollouts is going to be.
Okay. It's going to be a mix of a lot of different spectrum, is what I'm hearing. It's like a puzzle.
Lots of opportunities. That's the reason we actually, in CES, we took the opportunity to show, to make an announcement. On Monday, we announced a completely disruptive solution for the RF front end. All the components that go from the chipset, the digital, all the way to the antenna, the power amplifier, the filters. We actually announced the tunable front end because you have to bring the scale to the mobile industry. We're going to go from what will be thousands of combinations of bands on 4G to 10,000 combinations of bands with 5G plus 4G carrier aggregation. And the ability to have now smarts on the front end, so you can actually tune the front end, whether you're in a 5G or 4G, technology on the air interface, and wideband or narrow band, I think it's going to be pretty disruptive and actually an opportunity for us to bring the scale right at the beginning to the mobile industry as we transition to 5G.
Agree.
So let's bring it back to, if I'm a company in the audience, maybe a mid-sized company, what do I need to think about for 5G for my business? I mean, how should I be thinking about this? Should I be thinking 5G is going to be something I'm going to have to incorporate into my business? Yes.
I think that the digitalization going into all corporations is going to be super important, and that means that also the mobility, broadband, and cloud sort of enablers has to be in basically any company. Then there's still, you can do a lot with 4G today as well, and broadband in general. But 5G will give some new currencies where you can transform your workforce, right. You can be closer to your customers, you can have different type of applications where you're connected to customers, where you have real time. I mean, the real time will really be there. So I think what you need to understand as corporation is what type of currencies do I need given where I'm going with my customer base? How can I be more efficient using mobility, broadband, and cloud? Because those are the three elements. It's mobility, broadband, and cloud. Those together makes the transformation. It's not one of them, it's all three of them. So I think that's what I think all...
So how can I transform my business? How can I use AI to maybe make my business better,
yeah, so clearly,
smarter?
I think exactly. Hans, I think, described the overall thematic base on how business large think about. I would just articulate a couple more things. One is, I very much believe AI is perhaps the best friend or best accelerators of 5G connectivity because it's going to unleash so much more value. What is the top about? I won't belabor that. But another thing I want to mention is for China, honestly, the China mobile internet, the phone, is well ahead of the United States. Think about mobile payment, mobile experience. It's more advanced because they don't have a traditional strong PC network. You kind of go straight to mobile. And I see accelerating. And I would recommend all businesses, when you're in the broader mobile space, think about what payment can do more, what entertainment experience can do more. All those, particularly from Baidu perspective, we think video is going to be huge. Particularly video over time will increasingly, initially augment, over time, replacing a lot of written language communications in all forms. And the video will be a terrific new set of opportunities. And then maybe I say one last thing is kind of maybe my previous job at the Microsoft. Every company needs to have a digital transformation. Having more connectivity, lower latency, high bandwidths, mission critical in nature, for particularly going beyond the consumer, to your earlier point, to businesses. I may just elaborate. Baidu is working with like steel mills, manufacturers. They can all benefit. As leaders of those businesses, I think they all should think about proactively where they can reduce cost, where they can expand their customer bases, elevate, transform their current product to a new height. There's broad opportunity for everybody.
You know, if I can maybe add from a different angle, complementing this. If you think of every single industry today, and I think we will have a hard time finding an exception. The smartphone is a part of their business or their network. Like, if I just pick an example, if I look at the banking industry, people probably expect to do more today on a banking app than actually if they go to the branch. So I think companies need to think about, first of all, that is now an essential part of their business. What more capabilities they will be able to add, what do they do with smartphone when 5G come? And I think you're going to see a new upgrade on service capability. That's one. The second one, and we have limited time, but 5G creates a new paradigm shift on how you think about, I mentioned quickly, IT infrastructure. 5G takes the whole concept of sharing licensed and unlicensed spectrum is now integrated into 5G. So you have a situation today that enterprises build their own wireless network and the carriers build the wireless network to serve them. You have more conversions. Maybe they actually have a situation when the IT infrastructure goes to the cloud in partnership with a carrier and you have a completely new business model. The last, I think, element of that is what I'm just going to tie in what she said. Once you're connected to the cloud, you're collecting data. So what 5G will allow is an order of magnitude increase in the amount of information because the phones are going to have more capabilities, more sensors. It's going to have other industries as they can embrace mobility. We're going to have more information. So the ability to collect data and apply that for, machine learning, into the cloud and then run those inferences into the devices will change also the industry as well. So I think the transformation will be profound, but it's naturally going to occur just because of the presence that we have of mobility in everything.
Everything and everywhere.
Yes.
So if we were to come back here to this stage in a year, what will be different? Hans, will we be talking about Verizon's 5G network?
Absolutely. Of course. No, I think again, what we're seeing with all technologies, when they start with a new standard, it's a little bit hesitance in the beginning and then the bandwagon starts. And I think now we have a bandwagon.
Do you think this G is going to be a lot smoother than the past
I think there was going to be, I think that 2017, there were some discussion on 5G, some were in the lead doing things. 2018, we're going to hear so much more. So many more companies going to think about it and do it. And to be honest, there's a lot of industrial companies that are now thinking what they can do with it. A large corporation, what can we do? That are not in the technology area today. So I think we were going to see much more about that. We're going to see one US carrier, Verizon, launching some markets. So I think it's going to be great. Now, I think more ecosystem and more collaboration. Again, this is collaboration on the higher level because you need to work with the Cristianos of the world and the Baidus of the world in order to make it happen. So I think that's going to be very important, the ecosystem during 2018, because we have the release on 5G right now, how the mobility is going to work. But you need to test it, you need to work together. I think that's going to happen. I think we're going to talk much about that.
Chi, are we going to see a lot of AI in a year? And in a year, are we going to be, it's going to be just much more common?
Yeah, so the way we think about this is 2017 in China, we call it is Yuannian, meaning it's the beginning of a year. AI industry would be essentially solidified enough that it start to build the foundation. That's why Baidu as a company, we're pivoting the entire company. We're essentially pivoting towards AI. Design everything to accelerate innovation. To me, it's all about commercializing the technology so that's tangible. And that was last year. This year, we see essentially the early phase of takeoff, meaning that autonomous vehicles, clear. We will have volume productions for L4 and L3. I think
So we
that
will
will accelerate.
have, we
Next
will
year,
have
we will
some
see.
vehicles?
Yeah, exactly. What do you say? I'm sorry.
Next year, at this time, we'll have some autonomous vehicles?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We actually will have one L4 vehicle being volume produced this year. Next year, we'll have
Volume
two.
produced, okay.
So I think that pace will accelerate, and also the conversational AI, the smart home, the device deployment will also accelerate. The key is more commercialization of the technology. And the last thing I will say is the United States, China, the global innovation pace, in particular, through collaboration, through open platforms, will benefit everybody. Next year, when we come back to CES,
We're going to be talking about
I'm pretty
open
confident
platforms.
we're going to see a lot more innovation, and also innovation from China that goes beyond China, start to benefit the rest of the world.
Well,
Cristiano.
if we get invited to be here next year, what
We'll
about
be-
we're going to be
will we be
demonstrating,
seeing a
demonstrating a
phone?
Snapdragon power phone, maybe on a live network, you know? So I think that's what we want to do.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We're just about out of time, but thank you so much for the panel. Thank you for attending this morning.
Thank you.